Hi, how are you? Anyway, are you interested in becoming a probation officer? If you are, do have a look around my YouTube channel. There are all sorts of interesting discussions. And also, I've written a book which may be of interest to you. I think do have a look at it. It's available from Amazon UK. There's some really interesting reviews that explain what the book's about. So have a look for yourself, but it's called You the Sentencer, and by me, John Ebrington, and it's available from Amazon UK. Like I say, the reviews make very interesting comments, interesting reading. But I think if you're interested in going into probation, it'll give you quite an interesting overview of the kind of work that's involved and the kind of offenders that you might meet. And I think in itself it's quite an interesting read. Just to tell you a bit about myself, I struggled as a child. I've never been actually very good at writing. I had problems as a kid. In fact, I had trouble adjusting from being in France to the UK, and it was so difficult for me in that I even stopped talking for a period, and I found writing very difficult. And age 7, I was assessed as having a learning difficulty, and my parents weren't particularly were quite upset about that, and they moved me to another little primary school. But and then I started to thrive a bit, I think. So, but then I've had quite an unsettled background. I again lived in France for a period and went to school in France. And then I came back to the UK and was for a period in boarding school for a bit. And I've never really excelled at studies. I left school with, I think, 1 A level and 4 O levels, something like that. And at the time, it wasn't enough to go to university. I went into the hotel and catering industry. I trained to be a manager. It was quite a learning curve. It's very active. You're dealing with the public. You're working as a team. That kind of thing. And so I worked as a manager for a number of years. And then I kind of felt that this isn't really the job for me. I want something different. And one of my sister-in-law said, why don't you, I think you'd be good at probation. And I looked into it and I did a bit of voluntary work with probation, and I found that interesting and rewarding. I applied to become a community service supervisor, and I went out supervising people on various projects, and that was kind of interesting and difficult, and very good skills. And something I've always had, I feel, from early age, from when I was a junior manager and so on, was a skill in working with people and motivating them. And I think I've kept that throughout my life in the various jobs that I've done. It's been a kind of transferable skill that I've always had with me, motivating people. And I learned a lot. I found it quite enjoyable. And probation were pleased with me, encouraged me to apply for a post as community service officer, which I did. And I found that job really rewarding, and it was lovely to get worthwhile work done in the community that wouldn't have been done otherwise. And it seemed like a really productive way of punishing people, really, and doing worthwhile things. And I had all sorts of projects going on. I had some, you could place people individually. For example, I remember there was a university girl who didn't pose any risk to the public, and I had her placed in a women's refuge doing really good, worthwhile work there. I had some people work in charity shops. I had people working in a psychiatric hospital, actually. And one of my offenders did the Duke of Edinburgh Award whilst on community service, and he achieved gold, which was terrific. And the judge who sentenced him was so pleased that he actually awarded him the gold award, which I thought was terrific. Um, so I enjoyed it, being a community service officer. And what was rather lovely was probation managers said, well, we think you should apply to become a probation officer. I said, oh, no, I haven't got the skills. I can't write well enough. And they said, well, we think you can do it. And if old Sig can do it over there, we reckon you can do it too. And they nurtured me, and they helped me. One of the managers even helped. He did a little practice interview with me for my university application, and they told me, help me prepare. And I thought that was so kind, and they encouraged me and nurtured me to go into this job. So I did the course, which I really enjoyed because there was quite a lot of practical work that you could link in with the theories, and it was very practice based, which I liked, and experience, and a lot of work experience. And you're learning all the time. And so when I qualified, I worked in a very, very busy, tough area in London, and I learned a lot, I must say, and became quite experienced. And the thing was, what I found really helpful was you got your manager, you have monthly meetings with your line manager, and you form a good working relationship with your manager, and you can consult with them. And if you've got any concerns, or you can ask their advice, how to handle a case, and what should you do. And you and your manager help develop your career, look at your training needs, all that kind of thing. So working with your line manager is really important. And I think, do be honest with them and do form a good relationship with them. Also, my colleagues helped me tremendously, particularly with writing reports and things like that. And they used to look over my reports with me. They used to help me, and they say, oh, I think this would be better, and have you thought of this? And, I continue to grow and learn. And the other quality, I think, is empathy. In my own family, we've had troubles. My dad went through a very difficult period himself, and all these have been, these experiences I brought with me, and it gave me an understanding of, the sort of things that people can go through. I've even been a victim of stuff myself, So, but these experiences make me a humble person, give me empathy, and I think all these skills are useful. But what I really loved was motivating people, and I've got some lovely, lovely stories, which you can see on YouTube. There's a guy who stopped going to school age 12, and amazingly, he did an access course and went on to do a degree course. I mean, what a fantastic achievement. And that's just one, but I've got many other fantastic success stories of people that I supervised on probation. And that gives you such a lovely burst of positivity. To be honest with you, probation, it's a lovely job, and for me, it's tough. Workloads are very high, and you need to be able to look after yourself, de-stress, don't take too many work home. Do share your problems with your colleagues and your line manager, and all that kind of thing helps. But I actually, at last, found the job that I fitted. I felt that this is the job for me, and I absolutely loved it, actually, probation. And for me, the biggest buzz I got was, getting success out of people, out of bad can come good, and, getting these success stories. So, anyway, back to my book. I think, it's not a textbook, but it gives you a good insight into probation. It's interactive, actually. So the first section, I've written out answers that an offender answers to an interview about an offence that they committed. And I leave it for you to work out, does the person feel remorse for the offence? What is their attitude about their offending? What is their offending about? Are there other issues that are around that in their lives that could be important here? And so there's two cases like that. And I think, it's quite nice actually for you, the reader, to have to work things out, and I leave it to you. But one of them, there could be domestic violence going on or controlling behaviour perhaps, that kind of thing. So in the next section are a whole series of court reports. These are based on real events. I've rewritten them in the style that I would have done in the 1990s. I'm quite sure you could write better reports yourselves and maybe have a go, but they give you a kind of insight into the thought process that goes into writing a report, the kind of backgrounds that people come from that come to probation, and the kind of backgrounds of people that get into trouble. And they're people from all walks of life in these reports. So I think that in itself is quite interesting. And that was the main aim of my book, actually, was to put over to the public what sort of people come before the court. And perhaps that gives a clue about how we as a society could reduce crime rather than just sending people to prison. So, and then you've got the various options that the court can use. And there are various anecdotal stories about crime and people that I've dealt with. You've got all stratas of society. I've even dealt with some police officers, and I actually talk about a case. And interestingly, another book I read shed some light on this case. But basically, and the media haven't really cottoned on to what happened, but for me it was a major scandal, and I don't think it's been in the newspapers. But basically, the Met Police gave out hundreds of American Express cards to various officers for them to use for their expenses. So if they had to go and interview somebody in, say, in Spain, that'd been hit by a bomb in London, terrorist, the bombings or whatever, they could go and interview the person in Spain and use their credit card. But unfortunately, a lot of money was spent by these Met Police officers inappropriately, and about £5 million has never been accounted for by the police, that they're unable to account was spent appropriately. And the auditors found that a lot of money was spent very inappropriately. And out of all these hundreds of officers that spent the £5 million, only 2 were made examples of, and all the others have got away with it. And for me, that's incredible, isn't it? It's outrageous. And it's another one of these things that's been lumbered in the background and never hit prominence in the media. But there are plenty of stories like that, believe me. And so that's one little backstory and then I actually had somebody from the upper classes, and I talk about politicians as well and how they themselves have actually broken the law. And there's a little potted history of probation in recent years, what's happened to it, and how it's been managed by politicians. And again, not very good, to be honest. So to be a probation officer, you've got to be quite resilient. You've got to look out for yourself. And you've got to form good relationships, I feel, with the people you're working with, motivate them, understand them, help them address their issues. You're helping them to sort things out for themselves. In the final section of the book, I put all sorts of difficult moral dilemmas, and the idea is a lot of people see everything as black and white, but in fact the world is quite complex, and it's not either one or the other. It's often something in between, and it's quite a difficult. There are lots of difficulties for people to negotiate. Also, there are all sorts of things that perhaps we're not taught at school. You know, various morals that perhaps we should be taught at school, that would help us stay out of trouble in life. You know, so that's a kind of wider, more interesting chapter. But if you're interested in probation, I really do genuinely recommend, have a look at my book. My book was initially aimed at the general public to help them understand the role of probation and the sort of people that come before the courts, and to put over that prison doesn't always work. And I'm quite proud of a lot of the good work that probation does. And I think it's been undersold, So, a recent example was the Hugh Edwards case, where the guy committed awful offences, terrible. But he's been put on a sex offender programme. But the media kind of dismiss this as something, they don't even mention it. But I actually think it is something quite tough to be put on a sex offender programme. And he, he's going to have to face up to what he's done. He's going to have to understand victim perspectives. But it's kind of not even acknowledged that he's put on a sex offender programme. Oh, he got off going to jail. But I actually think that doing a sex offender programme is much more worthwhile and more challenging than doing 6 months in prison, But it's just like cast aside. And I don't think probation really needs to educate the public a bit more about what we do. Anyway, first little step though is have a look at my book. It's called You the Sentencer, and it's a good read actually, very straightforward. All the very best now, and have a lovely day. Cheers now, bye bye.